day, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a briefing regarding Taiwan and Spirit of America's work in Taiwan. I'm Jim Hake. I'm the founder and CEO at Spirit of America, and I'm very honored to be joined by Matt Turpin and Joshua Brandon. Matt, and I'll hand it over to them in a second. Matt is a former China director on the National Security Council. He's also a member of Spirit of America's advisory board. Thank you, Matt. And he's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. And Joshua Brandon, Army veteran, has been with Spirit of America for about 4.5 years now. He is our Asia Pacific Regional Director, and he'll be talking about the work that we're doing in Taiwan. As background for you all, Spirit of America is a privately funded 501c3 nonprofit. We are entirely citizen supported, and our mission is to engage citizens in preserving the promise of a free and better life. The way that we do that is by working alongside U.S. troops and diplomats all over the world and helping them save and improve lives, build relationships, demonstrate what America stands for in the world, and ultimately to protect and defend freedom and democracy, both here and at home. So before we get started, I want to thank all the supporters that we have on the call today, our board members and our advisory board members. You are deeply appreciated by all of us. So thank you for your support and thank you for being here today. One of the things that Spirit of America is most well known for is our rapid response and our rapid response capabilities in conflict zones. And Ukraine is a great example of that now. To date, we provided about $40 million of very targeted assistance to support Ukraine and help Ukraine win. Taiwan is a very different example of our capabilities. And we got started with that, or Josh Brandon and his team got started looking at Taiwan and how Spirit of America can help protect and defend Taiwan's freedom, or help Taiwan do that about 2 years ago. So what you're going to be hearing about today has been in the works for over the last 2 years. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Turpin, who will give us an overview of things to understand, think about with respect to Taiwan, and then we'll go over to Josh Brandon. So Matt, over to you.
Jim, thanks so much. Great to join everyone today. Wanted to first start off by my deep appreciation to all the work that Spirit of America has been doing over the years. I've certainly been following with great interest everything that you've been doing in Ukraine, and I think that has been an incredible achievement. So my hat's off to you, Jim, and the rest of the organization for everything you're doing. I think maybe to put in a little bit of context, maybe we can kind of give a little background of sort of what the U.S., China, and Taiwan relationship is sort of all about. I think, for many of you, you're seeing a little bit more about this in the news these days. It seems to be on the cover of sort of most current affairs magazines, front pages of major newspapers, highlighting the threat and potential danger of a conflict in the Taiwan Strait, and what's really happening sort of in the broader relationship as the U.S. PRC relationship declines and becomes more sour, and the United States becomes increasingly concerned that we'll see a conflict erupt in the Taiwan Strait as the Chinese government looks to enforce what it's sought to do for now a number of decades, which is to bring Taiwan back into the PRC and to recover that territory really through annexation. And so maybe we can give a little bit of background to sort of where we are and what the U.S. sort of relationship and the position is, and maybe some ideas about kind of where Spirit of America is becoming involved. And I think that we'll transition over to Josh and let him talk through a little bit of what he's going on the ground. But if we start off with the current relationship between the United States and Taiwan, which is an unofficial relationship, so the U.S. government does not have a formal embassy in Taipei, and the Taiwanese government does not have a formal embassy inside the United States. We maintain unofficial relations. Those unofficial relations are quite robust and strong. But this comes from a decision in 1979 to switch recognition from the people's, or from the Republic of China, which at the time had been sort of Taiwan, to the People's Republic of China, on the insistence by Beijing that the United States could only recognize one or the other. And the United States chose to sort of make that bargain and make that compromise within the context of the Cold War to bring the PRC on side against the Soviet Union, while maintaining an unofficial relationship with Taiwan and continuing to provide arms and other support to provide for what we hoped would be a peaceful resolution to the differences between Beijing and Taipei. Now that was 45, 50 years ago, right? As those aspects sort of became defined and put into place by 1979. And so now fast forward, 4 decades, and we're in a very different set of conditions, right? Things that we had thought would happen between the two countries sort of have not. And the political landscape has changed measurably, right? So Taiwan in 1979 was sort of a right-wing authoritarian dictatorship that ruled through martial law, prevented any sorts of democratic elections or political organizing by other parties on Taiwan. And by the mid-1990s, that had begun to change. And what we saw was the emergence of a robust democracy, characterized by multiple political parties vying within a rule of law and an open society and an open media landscape to compete to become elected and to be representatives of Taiwanese citizens. And so where we are today is we have a robust democracy on Taiwan, and that is providing, I think, for the Chinese Communist Party inside the PRC, it provides a very scary alternative, at least from their perspective, of what the Chinese people, the kind of prosperity and the kind of political system that they could have, as evidenced of what has happened over the last sort of 2 or 3 decades on Taiwan, which is a transition from one-party authoritarian rule to a multi-party democracy, which is highly prosperous, one of the most progressive and diverse countries in Asia, and continues to be a leader in the world for promoting human rights, civil liberties, and the like. An area that is quite representative of the kind of democracy that the United States would want to see. And for that and a number of other reasons, the PRC views this as a threat to their own legitimacy, right? So if the Chinese people were to interpret that, in fact, the people of Taiwan can certainly have a democracy, why can't we have a democracy? Those are questions that the Chinese Communist Party does not want its people asking. And hence they have picked up their real significant effort to isolate Taiwan, make Taiwan less capable of interacting with the outside world, and to essentially present to the Taiwanese people that the only option that they have is to either willingly come back into, to willingly rejoin the People's Republic of China underneath the Chinese Communist Party rule, or face significant military action in which they would be forced to do so against their will. And that's the sort of the condition we find ourselves in the backdrop of an effort by the United States government, as well as governments across Europe and Japan, to ensure that Taiwan is not isolated in this way. And this means that whether it's visits by political leaders to visit with or host Taiwanese leaders, that's the kind of activities that we see going on today. And that results in Beijing conducting military exercises and doing things to intimidate and isolate Taiwanese people. And I think one of the things that we've noticed over the last few years is the debate over what role would the Chinese people take, how would they defend themselves, what would they do about these sorts of things, when it seems sort of distant and unlikely that Beijing would use military force against Taiwan, many of these questions were sort of left unresolved. And yet today, Beijing is forcing the Taiwanese people to have to deal with these questions about their will to fight, what they would do, and what are they willing to do to be able to defend their democracy, and those questions. And in many ways, I think that is a perfect fit for where Spirit of America is, that sort of understanding that citizens have a responsibility for their own governance and their own participation in their own democracies. That I think, showing that the American people and the Taiwanese people share those sorts of thoughts and the ways in which we would organize and work together, and to demonstrate in unofficial ways that Taiwan is not isolated, is not left out of the international community. It does get to participate. It does have a voice, and it does continue to do that as one of the main ways to provide a deterrent factor to Beijing, and having them have to calculate what are the costs of their efforts to continue to coerce and force Taiwan to their will. And so that to me, I think helped kind of maybe frame the kinds of things that I think Josh has been doing over the last couple of months. And maybe at this point, Josh, I'll turn it over to you to kind of give some comments on where your programs are.
Josh, before you get started, for everyone listening, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your toolbar. If you have any questions, I will field those, and we'll do as many of those as we can. Thank you. Over to you, JB.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Matt. I really appreciated that rundown. So in short, the Spirit of America is we're building resilience in Taiwan through a whole nation approach. How do we do that? We're investing in champions throughout Taiwanese civil society, the government, and the military to really address, critical gaps and honestly take advantage of key opportunities in the national security space that government either can't do or are just so radical and emerging that we're well placed to take advantage. I truly believe our ability to leverage these national security entrepreneurs and invest in their good ideas is truly our competitive advantage. I'd say deterrence really doesn't come through preparation alone. Of all the work we're doing on the ground, which I'll walk you through here shortly, it's important to say we have to communicate deterrence. And I think we have to communicate this deterrence within Taiwan, which builds societal confidence. But even more important, and in a role the Spirit of America is uniquely suited to, is we can communicate, Taiwan's confidence, their resiliency, their desire to protect their democracy to our partners and allies throughout the region and in the world. And I think we've seen it in recent years. It's really the U.S. and its partnerships that are going to stand, the test of time and really protect Taiwanese democracy. If we refer to the map, to date we've conducted or supported through partners over 100 events, ranging from to experimenting with resilient communications. If you see the map, the civil society training is in blue. And then our work with the government and the military is in green. And so we've covered quite a lot of ground throughout the island. Our primary objective is empowering Taiwanese civil society to take pressure off of first responders and the military within a crisis. The flagship effort of this is working with an entrepreneur, one of these national security entrepreneurs named Enoch Wu. He's the executive director of a not-for-profit called Forward Alliance. And really, Forward Alliance it's started really with the desire to raise awareness of the need for crisis response, and really, the Spirit of America came in and helped take it from a small but plucky organization and turn it into a national organization that's training in crisis response skills, but also organizing civilians across the country and even working with the government on crisis response and trauma medical skills as well. To date, and over the last year, since March of last year, we've trained over 6,000 civilians in this basic course and crisis response skills. And these courses range from, your basic stop the bleed and, like basic trauma medicine for the average person on the street, all the way to light search and rescue and shelter management, skills that these volunteer civilian leaders can, not only use to support first responders, but in the event of a crisis, they can really take care of their communities and look inward. And then moving forward in the civil society sphere, this is where the Spirit of America and Forward Alliance partnership is really going to be powerful. There's a lot of great efforts on the government side to really, mobilize government or civilian resources. Where we're specifically focusing is creating, resilient, hyper-local communities. In the event of a crisis, and I think we've learned this in Ukraine, in Syria, in Sarajevo, and I think we've seen it in natural disasters such as Katrina and in the 9/21 earthquake in 1999 in Taiwan, is folks are really concerned about their family, their neighborhood, that immediate, area that they can, help and protect in the event of a crisis. And so we're providing these, we're working with these local communities, and it could be a school, it could be a church, it could be a village or a neighborhood, it could be even affinity group or a business like Microsoft. And we're training leaders in these crisis response skills, as well as some of their team members. And again, ranging from emergency medical all the way how to practice communication and run a shelter, so that you can create a network of resilient communities throughout the country that's going to take pressure off of first responders and the military in the event of a crisis. So we have two complementary efforts working directly with the government. In November, thank you. Referring to the slide, this Enoch Wu right there is the one putting on tourniquets. And the picture to the right is some of our civilian volunteers learning how to stop the bleed. And this isn't your typical first aid. We're not teaching, like resuscitation. These are, how to stop the bleed from, a puncture or a bullet wound. And you'll notice that they're putting tourniquets on civilians. That's a very specific crisis response skill that we found is needed and is frankly demanded by the Taiwanese public at this point. So in our secondary efforts with the government, we signed an MOU. Next slide, please. We signed an MOU with the government and with the National Fire Agency in November of last year. And really, it was to create the space for Spirit of America, Forward Alliance, and the National Fire Agency, who under Director General Jack Shao, and probably one of the most progressive and forward-thinking leaders we've worked with in Taiwan, to really create the space to not only elevate how the National Fire Agency can innovate and expand its ability to react in a crisis, but also to integrate a civilian approach. Currently we have teams on the ground right now, contractors, not only training, the level 4 and level 5 emergency and casualty care program, a trainer program that frankly is going to spread the ability of the fire, police, and EMS teams to operate not just in a normal disaster environment, but in a hostile conflict environment. We're giving them these extra skills so they can effectively do their job in a conflict environment. Of note, we've just finished 2 projects with the Taiwanese military, and again, to focus on medicine and resilient communications. And I think moving forward, much like Spirit of America's work across the globe, there's a lot of room to support bilateral security cooperation moving forward, especially as the U.S. effort, as many of you've seen, has started to grow over time. What's next for the next year? Well, in addition to creating this local resilient communities effort, we're working with the National Fire Agency to start a Taiwanese version of the Civilian Emergency Response Training Program. It's a program by FEMA to train civilian volunteers to directly integrate with the government response. What's interesting, and again, on the request of Director General Jack Shao, is he didn't just want to import a FEMA model. He turned to Spirit of America and said, look, I need you to work with civil society and my people to innovate and create a Taiwan-specific civilian emergency response program that's not just for national disaster, but that can also help plug civilians and our government employees in the event of a man-made disaster or crisis as well. And so over the next year, we're going to be piloting, approximately 4 to 6 teams. We'll then debut them and validate them at the 921 National Disaster Training Exercise in September. And it's hand them that curriculum at the end of the year. And again, that's Spirit of America's competitive advantage. We're in that innovation gap, and we can come in and quickly underwrite this and fill that gap that the government can't. I'm saying lastly, we're launching our regional communications program, and we'll be working with marketing firms throughout the region to tell the story of the work, not only the work that we're doing in Taiwan, but tell the story of the Taiwanese democracy. And we're not just telling these to Americans. We want to tell it to the Philippines, to Japan, to Thailand, and to all of our partners and allies throughout the region. So we want them to know that Taiwan is ready. They're resilient, and build their, not just build their confidence in Taiwan, but build their confidence in U.S. partnerships across the region. Next slide, please. And just in conclusion, here in the last 2 pictures, Vice President Lai here with the Spirit of America team on the ground in Taipei in one of our Stop the Bleed crisis response classes. And then Jim Hake, Director Shao, and Enoch Wu on the bottom right at the MOU signing. So over to you, Jim.
Thank you, Joshua. Matt, a question for you, which you touched on, but if you could address it one more time. Why should Americans care about Taiwan?
Well, I think, one of the reasons why Americans should care about Taiwan is that it represents the kind of success and government partner in the world that America wants to see. It's the kind of open, diverse, fully functioning democracy run by the Taiwanese people, not imposed from the outside, but of its own and standing on its own. And a world that's filled with countries like Taiwan is a place that is very prosperous for the United States and protects U.S. interests. A world in which countries like Taiwan are extinguished and are not allowed to participate and are not allowed to continue to exist is an area where U.S. interests and U.S. security is much more problematic. And so I think I think we should look at this through the lens of what kind of world do we want functioning, and that's a world where Taiwan is an exemplar of this, right? Something that was simply not the case 50 years ago, in which that was not the kind of functioning society and political system that was represented on the island. But we've seen that blossom in these past 30 years. There are a variety of other reasons, right? There are economic reasons, given that Taiwan is now the centerpiece of sort of the world's most important and advanced semiconductor manufacturing, which is the key inputs to our economic and national security. And I think we should also be very clear that sort of the geographic position of Taiwan in the Western Pacific is key to the protection of other treaty allies of the United States. For Japan, Taiwan's location is absolutely integral to Japan's own security, right? This is the same first island chain that Japan sits across. And so I think, there are sort of a variety of reasons here, but fundamentally this is about, what kind of world, what kind of international system do we want to have? And for the same rationale about why it's important for us to step up and support a Ukraine that's under assault, I think the same logic also comes out for this.
Well, thank you, Matt. And how you frame that, which is what kind of a world do we want, is a great lead into the next question, which is why is Spirit of America needed in Taiwan? Taiwan is a wealthy country. And I'm going to take the first crack at that, and then I'm going to hand it over to you, JB. The top level reason is because the kind of world that we want to help create as an organization is a world that stands for what America stands for, which is the promise of a free and better life. We want to see freedom and democracy in the world by choice ascendant in the world. So wherever we go and whatever we do, it is to add unique value to whatever the situation is that will serve those aims, really getting at the kind of world we want and the kind of world we want to pass down to our children and future generations. So in the case of Taiwan, as I mentioned at the beginning, Josh and his team started looking at how we could help in Taiwan about 2 years ago. And as one of our advisory board members, General Jim Mattis puts it, Spirit of America's core capability is figuring out what needs to be done and doing it. Now, I know that's a odd way to define an organization, but it's actually true. And in the figuring it out and doing it, what we're really looking at is, well, what needs to be done and what can government do? And then to fill that gap between what's needed and what government can do. So the example of Taiwan was really interesting to me because we're always asking, well, do we really need to do something? Because if we don't, if we don't, we don't. And in the case of Taiwan, what we have found is there's real value added to be able to come in and provide catalytic support, as Joshua mentioned, supporting kind of the civil society entrepreneurs who want to work on Taiwan's ability to deter and respond to a crisis. So there's a certain inertia just in general anywhere, and providing kind of venture capital support to those entrepreneurs is a way to help get the ball rolling and build momentum around the things that need to happen. The other is what we've developed over the years is a great kind of expertise in working in those seams between public and private. So when it comes to crisis response and crisis preparedness, it's critical to have the citizens involved. And the more the citizens do, the more they're involved, the greater their confidence, and that helps too. But so it's important to have citizens involved. But if they're not connected into the government in some fashion, then in the event of a crisis, it doesn't really accomplish much. So as Joshua mentioned, we have an agreement with and a relationship with the National Fire Agents in Taiwan, so we can help bring those private and public, the citizens and government players together in Taiwan. And that kind of American entrepreneurial energy brought to bear in this situation can accelerate things that might take 10 years and help them happen in 1 or 2. And that's what, even though Taiwan is a wealthy country, that kind of expertise and venture capital capability is part of what we're doing. So Joshua, over to you on that as well.
Sure, thanks, Jim. And I always like to start and think about our own democracy. And one of the things that really makes it powerful is our own civil society. It's not that government can't do it. It's that our democracy is formed on the foundation that our government and our civil society can work together to create the country that we have. And I think it's for the same for Taiwan. Taiwan is a fantastic, we call it a magic place. It's a fantastic democracy. And I think one of the greatest expressions of democracy and freedom within Asia Pacific. And there, in a lot of places we work, we're working with developing civil societies. Here, there's a robust civil society of Taiwanese citizens that are standing up and saying, I can help. I can make this work faster. We've got a good idea. Let's make it happen. And that is the power that we're trying to harness. We talk about the two things we do good well, and I say provide rapid assistance and underwrite national security entrepreneurs with good idea. I'll go back to Enoch Wu, our primary partner there. This is an entrepreneur that had a good idea about saw that Taiwan. And it wasn't that the Taiwanese government, didn't see this or couldn't do it, but he had this vision that I would like to leverage the power of Taiwanese society to back up the first responders in my military in the event of a crisis. And he had a vision, but what he didn't have was the resources to get there. And that's really where Spirit of America comes in. We come in and meet this entrepreneur. We see his idea, and we harness that idea. And we harness that passion, to be honest with you. And we can test that idea for efficacy, help him scale it, but and not just push that vision through, but we help him evolve that vision and expand it. As you see, it's not just what it started out as in training civilians and first responders in basic medical care. He's working with the National Fire Agency. He's working with different elements of the government to find these gaps and plug them as fast as he can. And again, just harnessing these good ideas and these passions of civil society in Taiwan. That's why Taiwan. That's why we can look at.
Matt, anything you want to add to that before we wrap up? Okay. Well, everyone, we're at the half hour, a little bit beyond. We have some great questions, including from like a good portion of our advisory board, which we'll get back to you on. So Jim, General Clark, Fig, we'll get back to you on those questions. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll follow up to see if you have any other things we might be able to talk to you about with respect to Taiwan and our work there, but deeply appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.